Good morning, everyone. I'll go ahead and get started. And we'll begin with our meditation. So wherever you are today, whether you're sitting on the floor or a chair or sofa, just make sure that you're comfortable and balanced in your seat. Back should be straight, the chest open. Then we want to relax our bodies and concentrate our minds. So we'll begin by relaxing our bodies with a deep breath. And as you exhale fully, feel the stress in your body just drain away with the breath. Then to help us relax further, we'll mentally scan the body, starting at the top of the head. Slowly move your attention downward, checking in to see if there's any lingering stress, tension. So as you move your attention downward, relax the forehead, relax the eyes, relax the cheek, the jaws. Relax your neck and shoulders. Relax the arms, the chest and back. Relax the hips, the thighs, knees, calves, ankles, and toes. When the body is calm and relaxed, now bring your attention to your breathing. Notice the in and out breaths. You're not trying to control the breath, you're just observing it. Natural flow. Breath may be deep or shallow, may be long or short. Maybe a brief pause between the inhale, the exhale. And you may find it helpful to count the breaths. Inhale, exhale 1. Inhale, exhale 2. And when you count to 5 or you lose count, just start over at 1. And when you find that you've wandered away from the breath and thoughts, memories, plans, judgments, distractions, that's normal. Just notice that your mind has wandered and gently bring your attention back to your breathing. And we'll begin. So we'll end our meditation session. Before you stand up or move around, make sure you give your body a chance to adjust. And also try to maintain this sense of mindfulness and calm as you go throughout the rest of your day. So for the next section of our program, we have Venerable Cintita is here today to give us our Dharma talk. First, let's offer 3 bows, pay homage to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And 1 bow to Venerable Cintita. Thank you. And for those of you who don't know, I'll introduce Venerable Cintita. Before entering monastic life, Venerable Cintita, who earned a PhD in linguistics and a master's in computer science, was a professor of computer science at Southern Illinois University and worked in the corporate world doing research and development in artificial intelligence, which brought him to Austin, Texas. In 2001, Bhikkhu Cintita retired from his career to devote himself to practice and later teaching, which he's done ever since. He spent 1.5 years at Tassajara Zen Center Monastery in California, which is in the Japanese tradition of Suzuki Roshi, founder of the San Francisco Zen Center. Returning to Austin, he ordained as a Zen priest in 2003 at the Austin Zen Center, which he had helped found a few years before. He lived, trained, and taught at that Austin Zen Center for 6 years before deciding to ordain as a Theravada Buddhist monk. He currently resides at the Satago Buddhist Vihara in Austin. Venerable Cintita?
Okay, well, I'm very pleased to be back here again. The topic of my talk is on the aggregates. I think it was announced as dependent co-arising. There's some confusion because I told Barbara I would pick a topic from dependent co-arising at one point. I'm just now finishing a rather large book on dependent co-arising. And I have a very, very good draft. I'm sending it out to people. If anybody would like to have a copy, a PDF, please email me and ask, and I'll forward you a copy. So I want to talk about the 5 aggregates. It's a topic I take up in quite a bit of detail because it's the 5 aggregates. Most of the aggregates are links in the 12-fold chain of dependent co-arising. The idea of the aggregates is kind of a recurrent theme. It gives you a lot of insight into the teachings about dependent co-arising. So I'm focused on the aggregates. How many people know what the aggregates are, or what I'm talking about? They're called the khandas in Pali or skandhas in Sanskrit. So they're quite well known in the Mahayana tradition as well as in the Theravada tradition. Okay, the Dhammapada begins. Most of you probably are familiar with the Dhammapada. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of an ox. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a peaceful mind, and happiness follows like a never departing shadow. Most of us experience the world as a given. something external to ourselves, but on which our well-being depends. These initial verses of the Dhammapada tell us that the world is in fact mind constructed, and a lot of people are confused by this. In our ignorance, we presume it to be one way, but we can actually presume it to be otherwise, or presume it not at all. Mind is malleable, and how we live our lives of practice make it either corrupted or peaceful. With a corrupted mind, the world is painful. With a peaceful mind, it is beyond suffering. The Buddha was scrupulous in always making clear in his psychological teachings that he's talking about the world as we experience it, not as how it's given objectively, somewhere out there beyond our experience. For instance, the way a scientist might view it. This is the world that is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. It's mind constructed. The Buddha also said, it's just within this fathom-long body with its perception and mind that I declare that there is the origination of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of the world. Okay, I want to talk today about a hugely important teaching of the Buddha that's often been misunderstood, and that is the 5 aggregates, or khandhas, or skandhas. It's been misunderstood because people forget that when we talk about the world, we're consistently in the Buddhist teachings talking about the world as we experience it, which may or may not correspond to the world that's really out there beyond experience. In fact, I'm convinced now that it has very, very little correspondence with it. So the world, the 5 aggregates are a way of talking about the world of experience. This is their main function. The 5 aggregates are appearance, sometimes called form, feeling, perception, formations, and cognizance, or sometimes called consciousness. So appearance, feeling, perception, formations, and cognizance. The aggregates were actually mentioned in the Buddha's very first teaching, the first turning of the wheel, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, as the aggregates of appropriation, or the aggregates of attachment. And a lot of you will have heard that expression. Here is the Buddha's statement from that famous sutta. The Buddha says, birth is painful. He's talking about suffering. Birth is painful. Old age is painful. Illness is painful. Death is painful. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress are painful. Association with the disliked is painful. Separation from the liked is painful. Not getting what you wish for is painful. In brief, the 5 aggregates of appropriation are painful. The aggregates recur over and over in the suttas. It's a very basic teaching. The Samyutta Nikaya, which is this book, is a collection of suttas of the Buddha. There's basically about 5 books like this that collect all of the early discourses of the Buddha. And the Samyutta Nikaya has a large section devoted exclusively to the aggregates. And it's in this wisdom volume, it takes up 131 pages. And it encompasses 159 discourses of the Buddha. So let's start by explaining what the aggregates are, at least as I and many others understand them. Briefly again, the five aggregates refer to the worlds as we experience it. And the five aggregates of appropriation refer to our personal footprint in that world, everything we choose to have a stake in within that world. So let's unpack this. The world is the world as we experience it. So if we experience something, like a tree, for instance, it's because we're aware of it. Therefore, we can say that the world and everything in the world is a collection of awareness events. If I see a dog, that is an awareness event. If I hear a dog or think about a dog, that is an awareness event. The dog never enters my world except as part of an awareness event. This is what makes it the world of experience. Now, an awareness event has two parts. First, there's awareness itself, and awareness itself belongs to mind or cognition. And then there is the content of the event, the dog. If I'm aware, I have to be aware of something. This is why we can say all experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. We can presume that the dog exists there out in the world before I'm aware of the dog. But the dog enters my world of experience only because I'm aware of it. So all experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. This doesn't mean that the dog itself is made by mind. The dog is content and presumably exists out there in the world, although we know that we can be aware of things out in the world that aren't there. We have hallucinations, for instance, mirages, things like that. And we don't really know, we have no way of really knowing how close the way I experience the world corresponds to the world. I may just be dreaming everything and be in a matrix. But in any case, the mind is responsible for experience. And when I say an experience event, I mean something that is mental, that takes place in space, it takes place in time, particularly. Seeing something, thinking something, it's something the mind does. So let's unpack the aggregates. The word aggregate, khanda in Pali, simply refers to a mass, a heap, or a pile of anything, an unstructured grouping of something. The word aggregate is a little bit fancy for this. The word khanda is not at all fancy, but aggregate has become the standard translation. If we have a pile of wood or a pile of trash, that's an aggregate. So we have five aggregates, five piles of something. What are these somethings? They're awareness events. In this scheme, there are five kinds of awareness events. And the claim is that this accounts for our entire world of experience. So what are these five kinds of awareness events? So I'll go through them briefly. The first one is an appearance, or what's often called a form. An appearance is awareness of a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, or so on, mediated by one of the senses. For instance, shapes and colors in the eye or vibrations in the ear. These are appearances, a kind of awareness event. Some people teach that appearance refers to the physical world or to our own body, and that the other aggregates refer to factors of the mind. But the content of appearance is usually physical, but the event itself, once again, is mental. So it's not a helpful claim to say that appearances are physical and the other aggregates are mental. We could not experience an appearance, for instance, without the work of the optic nerves and many neurons in the brain. In fact, in meditation, we talk about bare awareness. Bare awareness is appearance, because appearance already has the awareness as part of it, plus the content. If appearance were purely physical, then it would not be an experience. That is, it would be outside of the world, and therefore irrelevant to the Buddha's psychological teachings. It's only through an awareness event that something physical enters the world. Once again, just trying to make that very clear. A feeling, the second khanda or aggregate, is awareness of the goodness of something, whether it is pleasing or displeasing. It's quite spontaneous, and feeling events arise relentlessly. It is meaningfulness, affective assessment of another experience as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So the third and middle aggregate is perception. And perception's awareness of a conceptualized feature of an object, such as color, texture, shape, or other categories, something recognized as familiar and generally given a name. At first glance, we might see certain colors and shapes and appearance, but then these resolve themselves very quickly into a dog. And not only a dog, but my dog, Fido. Perception events are very quick and usually effortless. To produce them, the mind depends on past experience. It's because we have been aware of Fido on many occasions that we can recognize him so quickly. Similarly, we know something is a tree or a book or a house very quickly because of previous familiarity. Notice that although perception is an awareness event, mental, its content is typically physical, more often than not, just like appearances. The fourth aggregate is the formation, sometimes called volitional formation. It's awareness of something through inference or by compounding of parts. For instance, we're aware of Fido because we see his tail sticking out from behind the sofa. So we perceive a tail, but we have to infer the dog. Formations are similarly involved in making plans. We perceive the spoon, we perceive the bowl, we perceive the container of ice cream, and we're in business. A formation event arises, the content of which is a plan to acquire nourishment. Even in this case, the content can be considered physical, since a plan is really a sequence of actions to be carried out in the physical world in the future. Mental and physical doesn't help us a lot to distinguish the aggregates from each other. Okay, so there's only 5 aggregates, so you can all memorize what they are pretty easily, is cognizance or consciousness. I've usually, in my writings and in my previous talkings, I've talked about it in consciousness, but in writing my book on dependent co-arising, I find that the word cognizance hits the mark a little bit better than consciousness and doesn't carry as many connotations as consciousness does. Cognizance is the most cognitively complex and creative form of awareness. It's magic. It's comprehensive awareness of things. The Buddha likens cognizance to magic in that it conjures up an experienced reality, often outrageously by sleight of hand and illusion, but one which the wise are able to see through if they look carefully. Here are the words of the Buddha about cognizance. Now suppose that a magician or a magician's apprentice were to display a magic trick at a major intersection, and a man with good eyesight were to see it, observe it, and appropriately examine it. To him, seeing it, observing it, and appropriately examining it, it would appear empty, void, without substance. For what substance could there be in a magic trick? In the same way, a monk sees, observes, and appropriately examines any cognizance that is past, future, or present, inner or outer, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near. To him, seeing it, observing it, and appropriately examining it, it would appear empty, void, without substance. For what substance would there be in cognizance? So a magician creates an imaginary world through props and sleights of hand, but a more modern example maybe makes this point as vividly. Notice that when a magician does his magic, it's our cognizance that tricks us, that thinks something's there, or there's some reality there that is not actually there. Okay, suppose sounds impinge on the ear. It's an appearance, it's music in this case. What we become cognizant of as a result varies in some remarkable ways with small shifts of attention. At first, we might be cognizant of a loudspeaker. We objectify the loudspeaker as there in the corner, and it's producing the sound. Well, we might instead hear through the speaker and be cognizant of an entire orchestra. Though we are in a rather small room, the orchestra includes many people and their various instruments producing the sound. As we are clearly cognizant of the individual instruments, brass, strings, and percussion, but further we can hear through the orchestra to become cognizant of the music itself, the melody, rhythm, and harmony, the overall temporal structure of the composition, its aesthetic qualities, evocative of certain emotional states, completely abstracted from any spatial dimension. Notice that we seem to be able to presume multiple worlds of different sizes and shapes, each with a kind of internal coherence, and each with a claim to being reality in some, however obscure, sense. Similarly, the perceptual field of appearances supports directly the conceptualization of no more than what phenomenologists would call a profile. For instance, the front surface of a house or a dog. But cognizance almost invariably elaborates what we see gratis into three-dimensional objects with back and side, something we can walk around and in the case of the house, enter, not just a rather flat profile. Moreover, a cognizance event already produces anticipations of what we will see when we decide to walk around or enter the house. Cognizance also gives us awareness of objects that exist out there, are substantial, permanent, and independent, and convinces us that they are really like that. It also convinces us that there is a me out there and that things are permanent rather than impermanent, as the Buddha teaches. Cognizance is an adept salesman. It's a kind of awareness that puts objects in a good light and convinces us that they're worth craving and attaching to. It persuades us to buy an item of merchandise, shining, solid, durable, even new, ever new, and indispensable. We take it home, take it out of the box, and discover shoddy construction, cheap materials, ill-fitting seams. It falls apart on use, the paint peels off. But that's okay because it barely performed its intended function anyway. Our purchase history is littered with the shards of such broken promises. Cognizance creates a lot of problems for us. Some people teach that cognizance is bare awareness. This goes along with teaching that appearance is something physical, independent of awareness. If this were the case, we would have to account for awareness of appearances. If appearances are purely physical, we have to come and provide the awareness from outside of the appearances. Perceptions and formations are already a bit complex, and conceptual and feelings are rather specialized. Therefore, they attribute bare preconceptual awareness to cognizance of appearance. However, the Buddha's description of cognizance as a magic show doesn't support this analysis. Cognizance is conceptually very, very complex. Some people also teach that the aggregates describe the person, the psychophysical organism. Okay, so some people also teach that the aggregates describe the person, the psychophysical organism. This actually has some problems. First, appearances become the physical body in this analysis. That's not what appearance means. The word rupa means appearance. It's how something appears to us. So the Pali word, it doesn't mean body as kaya. The other aggregates apparently become cognitive faculties. Part of our psychological endowment, for instance, is to perceive things. So we can talk about a faculty, maybe a part of the brain that's able to perform perception for us. But that makes perception a thing, not an aggregate. And perception as a faculty is not part of our world. We can't experience it directly. We can only experience we can experience perceptions as events, not as a faculty. So it's an abstraction. So this analysis really falls outside of the world. We can experience perception events, but we can't experience a faculty except by presuming it as an abstraction. Once we presume something, that's simply another awareness event. Thanissaro Bhikkhu has traced the first reference to this analysis of aggregates as mind and body, or the person, or the psychophysical organism, to the 1st century BC, long after the Buddha. So I would like to talk about what we do with the aggregates. The Buddha taught this teaching for specific purposes. And I will, because we're getting to 11 o'clock, I'll have to take this up next week. But let me just briefly say that the aggregates show up in the teachings in basically 2 contexts. And the description of the aggregates is used in describing 2 of the 12 links of dependent co-arising. It's used in describing appropriation or attachment, and it's used in describing becoming. So the aggregates are used in becoming to describe how we accrue our world of experience, how we build up our world of experience through many awareness events. And this is described in terms of the aggregates. So it becomes part of the conceptual model that the Buddha develops for dependent co-arising of human cognition. The second way that the aggregates are used is to provide a basis for systematic contemplative practice aimed at undermining attachment or appropriation. And so it asks us to take examples of things that we're attached to, and then basically deconstruct them in terms of the aggregates and then ask ourselves, what is it we're specifically attached to? Is it a perception? Is it a cognizance? Is it appearance? And ask ourselves over and over again. It's a way of bringing the mind into our everyday world, where we tend to ignore the mind. We tend to experience the world, but we think the world we're experiencing directly without mind, that it's right there. We just have to show up. So it's a way of deconstructing our experience of the things that we are attached to. So that's where this concept, the aggregates of appropriation or the aggregates of attachment comes from. Okay, so let me stop here, but next month I'll continue talking about this and talk about these practices, the practice implications essentially of the aggregates.
Thank you so much, Venerable Cintita. That was a very good talk, very informative.
Okay, well, you're very welcome. I always enjoy talking to this group. I hope in not too many months I can appear in person again.
Yeah, we hope so too.
I'm in Austin, by the way, for people that don't know it, and it snowed a little this morning. There's a little bit of white on the ground.
So we'll go ahead and wrap up today's program. And we'll end with 3 bows in homage of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And 1 bow to Venerable Cintita.
Okay.
Thank you.